Hello and what is up, YouTube? My name is G3Iron and welcome to the Week 2 meta overview of the 313 Ritual League. My apologies for the sound quality and the video quality. I am once again recording from my office, but hey, something is better than nothing. At least that's my motto nowadays. Kind of like the hair on my head. Something is better than nothing, right? Today, the focus of our discussion is primarily going to be the character choices and ascendancy choices that players are making in the 313 Ritual League and the ongoing expansion for the entirety of this year, Echoes of the Atlas. Any and all of the statistics that we are referencing today either come from previous league's official Path of Exile numbers or from POE Ninja, whether that's current or previous searches using POE Ninja as a resource site. So, without any further delays or disclaimers or bald jokes, let's jump into today's discussion. Our first point of comparison today is the character overview comparison. For today's discussion, we're looking at Ritual SC and Ritual SSF HC as points of comparison for character selections that players have made during the first 2 weeks of the 313 patch cycle. The perennial superstars that are the Shadow and the Witch come out as the top choices in Ritual SC during the first 2 weeks, whereas in SSF HC, it does seem to be a bit of a break in the pattern, noting that the Duelist, the Witch, and the Templar all have healthy amounts of popularity for the early weeks of the league. You might be wondering why I chose this particular league to take a look at SSF HC rather than simply Trade HC, and the answer is I simply wanted to change something up and get a comparison of how players play Path of Exile when trade is an option versus when trade is not an option. I'm not making any promises about the future and the way how we'll take a look at numbers, but I think SSF HC gives us a new level of nuance and appreciation for discussion moving forward about the meta. Path of Exile is a different game with trade than when you don't have access to trade. Path of Exile is a different game when you're in Trade League and the trade website is working, and it's a different game when you're in Trade League and the website isn't working. But that's a discussion for another day. Taking a look at character statistics on a league-by-league basis is interesting, but the best part about it is that it allows us to actually go back and basically choose different data points at which we can compare the present league and the present choices and the present meta decisions that players are making versus previous leagues and previous choices that players have made. So if we were just to take a look at ritual character choices versus heist character choices, this is what the graph would look like. This is what the comparison in the data would look like. Marauder has actually grown in popularity slightly from heist to ritual league. Same is true for the Templar, as well as a slight change, an ever so slight change in the Ascendant of 0.1, but a significant change with the Ranger having plus 6% from where it was last league. To make up for the difference in those numbers, the Witch and the Shadow have both fallen off in comparison as character selection choices for the first 2 weeks of Ritual versus the first 2 weeks of Heist. Now that's looking at a side-by-side, relatively close comparison, the last league versus the current league. But what happens when we take a look a year ago at Metamorph League versus Ritual League? Well, then the numbers become a bit more interesting to take a look at. It's fascinating to see and shocking to see that the Templar, the Witch, and the Ranger all basically are sitting at the same spots in terms of their character selection from last year. Basically, character selection over the course of a year really hasn't changed all that much. Yes, there is a dip in terms of the overall number of players choosing to play shadow-based characters, and that change has basically been made up by small, significant changes that have been made with character selections of Marauders, Duelists, and Ascendants. When I first ran these numbers, I didn't think I would find that much that interesting. But when I ran the numbers, it was shocking and amazing to see that over the course of a year, basically 3 character classes were staying unchanged from the course of the beginning of 2020 to the beginning of 2021, at least in the early stages of these respective leagues. Players are basically playing Templar choices, Witch choices, and Ranger choices at the same rate as what they were last year. Really does say something when we've had all of the various tweaks and changes to all the different ascendancies and all the different character paths, as well as all the new skill gems that have come out, as well as all the new player power that is now available in the game a year later. I guess the old cliche of the more things change, the more things stay the same is still true. Witch and Ranger and Templar are still basically as popular as characters themselves, not ascendancies, we'll get to that in a minute, but as characters as they were last year at this same time. Speaking of ascendancies, let's take a look at the breakdown of popular current ascendancy choices in Ritual Week 2. We see coming in at the top spots, we've got the Necromancer and the Assassin coming in at the very top end in terms of Ritual SC's popularity. Rounding out the top 5 are the Elementalist, the Pathfinder, and the Gladiator. In SSF HC, you've got the Elementalist, the Necro, the Champion, the Gladiator, and the Inquisitor rounding out the top 5. This was a pretty interesting point of comparison when comparing Trade League SC versus SSF HC, in that basically if a class has got more defensive options, there's more chances that it will be selected into a higher position of popularity for SSF HC. And if a particular Ascendancy class has got more build variety or build options that you can choose from multiple different archetypes inside that Ascendancy, then it's probably more likely to be higher up on the list of popular choices in Trade League. In comparing Ascendancies, I wanted to compare the Ascendancy choices of last year Metamorph with current choices in Ritual 313 and the previous year's League's Synthesis. Now, you might be saying, okay, Iron, why didn't you go further back than Synthesis? If I'm being transparent, I don't have numbers that I've been tracking since Synthesis that I had access to. I've got some little bits of data here and there, but simply nothing that I could actually say, yes, this is comparing at least apples to apples. It would be more like comparing apples to couch cushions. When we take a look at Ritual versus Metamorph, you can see that there are some pretty big swings. Notably, the Saboteur was incredibly powerful and incredibly popular during Metamorph, and it's basically fallen off the map during this particular league by way of comparison. While the Necromancer is still a very, very popular Ascendancy choice in Ritual, it has significantly taken a hit in terms of its overall popularity from Metamorph only 2 weeks in last year. Really isn't that much of a surprise because last year really brought in the heyday of Necromancy. Really, that all started during the 3.8 Blight League cycle, and then it continued all the way through Metamorph. But before, there were some massive changes to the way how Bone Offering worked and Flesh Offering worked. But basically, once those changes came through after Metamorph, we've seen a slow but steady decline in terms of popularity of the Necromancer. You compare the current Ritual numbers versus Synthesis from the previous year, 2019, we see similar sorts of drop-offs between the two top-level choices of Ascendancies. Namely, it used to be Trickster during Synthesis and Occultist. Occultist basically doesn't exist as a major competitive choice at the moment when compared with Synthesis, and Trickster has fallen and taken a backseat to what it used to be. Overall, I think those two things are a good thing. I think over the last year, we've seen a lot more consistency in terms of player choices and player power available across a wide, diverse selection of Ascendancies. It used to be that a whole slew of Ascendancies, we're talking 6, 7, 8, 9 Ascendancies, were at 1 to 2% played, and now we're only seeing about 4 or 5 of those in the 1 to 2% category, and oftentimes we're seeing more 3 to 5% category in terms of popularity number of player percentages on POE Ninja. Does that mean that Path of Exile is a balanced game when it comes to character selection and player choice? No, it doesn't. There's still things that are at the top and still things that are at the bottom. But we can say that the game is more balanced now than where it was in Synthesis, and it's more balanced now, at least in terms of player choices of it, than it was during Metamorph. Thanks so much for joining us for today's discussion, everybody. I'd love to know down below in the comments what your thoughts are, what your reactions are as we take a look at where the meta is presently and what choices players are making during the 313 Ritual League, and what sorts of choices GGG has made over the last year to 2 years that have led us to this point. Feel free to leave us a comment down below. As always, if you're new to the channel, you can go ahead and like, subscribe, and ding the bell to be notified about future videos, discussions just like this one. And as always, I hope today is the day a Mirror of Calandra drops for you. Thanks so much for joining us for today's discussion. If you'd like to join other Patreon supporters in supporting the channel, you can do so with the links provided in the video description. And if you'd like to join us for more discussions on Discord, there's a join link there for you as well. Thanks once again, and I hope a Mirror of Calandra drops for you.